Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us the final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
Transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's another episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Let's Find Out, our guest brings experience and knowledge to the field of paranormal investigation. Hailing from the historic and haunted Appalachian coal region of eastern Pennsylvania, as the former director of the Pennsylvania Paranormal Research Team, he's dedicated to uncovering the mysteries of the supernatural. Through his captivating book series, Strange Stories from the Skulking Stream, he chronicles the folklore and paranormal history of the Schuylkill River area, shedding light on its otherworldly phenomenon with professional precision and insight. There will be magic in the mountains tonight. All this plus more. Please welcome back author, researcher, and paranormal investigator, Richard Bigg. Richard, my friend, welcome back to Let's Find Out. I'm happy to have you back, my friend.
Thanks for having me. That's a great intro. I should have you follow me everywhere I go to do the presentations and things, do my intros.
I'll do it, man. I'll get out there in a nice suit like the boxing guys and just bring you down.
Heck yeah, get the big microphone on you.
Oh, I'll do it, man. I got a suit. We'll travel.
We'll get
talk
paranormal.
about that. Oh, shoot. There you go, man. Let's copyright that a trademark. We're gold, man. But no, I'm happy to have you back. And I was also happy to see that you got a second book out now. So congratulations on that, my friend.
Thank you.
So one of the things that both our states, here in Pennsylvania, I'm in West Virginia, we have several things in common, actually. Coal, cryptids, and the paranormal. But there isn't. Yeah, it is three, right? I'm terrible at math and spelling and all the above. Perfect for a podcaster. There's an interesting location in your area, unlike any other. The Schuylkill River area, I think it was around, and I was looking through, it was around 1825. That river was used to transport coal and other goods, but there's more to it than just that. For our friends, the listeners that may not have caught the last episode you were on earlier this year, can you give us a little background about it? Because I understand that there's been encounters and sightings of perhaps some sort of spectral figures in that area, something like that.
Yeah, the Schuylkill River is eastern Pennsylvania, sort of eastern central Pennsylvania. It's very big in the coal region. It's named after, or I guess Schuylkill County is named after the river, but it runs from Schuylkill County down through Berks, Lebanon, Bucks, all the way down through Philadelphia. So a lot of what we would consider the most haunted places in America, like Eastern State Penitentiary, is right along the Schuylkill. What's the other? There's several old asylums and things along the Schuylkill that are considered some of the most haunted places in America. They're all along the Schuylkill River. In my first book, I talked about Bigfoot, large cats, giant snakes. In a future volume, I hope to talk about some dragons and fairies and demons and strange things like that. Like you mentioned, I was the leader of the Pennsylvania Paranormal Research Team, so we have a lot of haunted history. And in this volume, I have a lot of history of witchcraft and magic use along there. So it's a very historical region, the Schuylkill River region. It's sort of right from before the War of Independence all the way through modern days. I mean, we're along Philadelphia, so very historical region, very rich in strange history and, like you say, the paranormal.
Yeah, talk about Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. Pennsylvania is kind of one of those iconic states when it comes to the history of this country and the founding of this country. So much went on at that time, but behind all that, we're looking into things paranormal. Now, in that region where we're talking about the witchcraft and the paranormal, was this something that was practiced by the Native Americans at that time, or was it something that was brought in because, of course, this country has so many immigrants from different parts of the world that brought their own customs or religions from different countries? Was that already implanted in that river area already, or was it imported?
I go into it a little in the book. The natives did have their own practices, their own spiritual practices. I tried to steer away from it for the most part, just because so much of that has been lost, and it wouldn't really be fair as a white guy several hundred years after the fact. I tried to go off of the historical things that I read about it, but yeah, they did have their own spiritual beliefs. In the first book, I talk about the native beliefs in spirit forms called Manitou, and the giant snakes seen in the region are sort of reflections of Native American snake spirits. They saw the spirit called the Great Lynx as sort of an equivalent spirit to the snake spirit. So in the first book, I talk about the giant black cats that are seen along the Appalachian region and how they're linked to the Native American spirituality. And then, like you say, when the Europeans came over in this region, it was largely German immigrants. So we have a lot of German folk heritage and folk magic practice. England to a lesser extent, Ireland to a lesser extent, but a lot of, at least in Eastern Pennsylvania, the magical practice has been based on German folk magic. And what a lot of people don't realize is that Pennsylvania is actually uniquely suited to magical practices because of our history. Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn. And what you have to understand about William Penn is he was a Quaker. Quakers are fairly progressive compared to the spiritual practices of the day when he was alive. William Penn was actually tried for his spiritual practice of the Quaker faith. So when he founded Pennsylvania, he decided to specifically found it as a place that's free of religious persecution. So Pennsylvania, throughout history, has taken a unique stance on witchcraft and magic users. Prior to the Salem witch trials, there was actually a witch trial in Pennsylvania. William Penn actually oversaw the witch trial himself. He was the judge in the case that took place in Chester County in southeastern Pennsylvania. A lot of people will still claim that that's the only witchcraft trial ever in Pennsylvania. It's actually not the case. I go over several in the book, but the outcome of the case was that the two ladies were found to have been guilty of having the reputation of a witch, but innocent of witchcraft itself. And that was a unique legal maneuver that William Penn took so that his new colony wouldn't be one of these places where witches were tried and killed on the basis of things like people's dreams. When people would dream about somebody coming to their bedside at night, they called that appearing in spectral form. That is actually has been used throughout history as evidence itself in witchcraft trials, and it was used in Salem about 10 years after the Pennsylvania trial to actually kill the accused witches. But he took the stance that that would not be enough to use as evidence. So throughout Pennsylvania's history, it hasn't been tried as witchcraft. Any time that somebody has had a case where they supposedly cast a spell or a curse on somebody, it's been tried as a civil matter, which is unique. There have been cases of witchcraft in other states, and like in Massachusetts, they were put to death or found guilty of witchcraft itself. Pennsylvania took the stance that we're not going to kill somebody based off of this kind of evidence, but you can sue them. So a lot of the time what happened was if somebody was found guilty of whatever it is that they were being accused of, they would be fined, or they would have a bond for good behavior. So they would be charged sort of a fee or a fine for witchcraft. And so Pennsylvania throughout history has been sort of the place where unique or unusual spiritual practices can be practiced without fear of persecution or being put to death.
You know, as you're telling me about this part of Pennsylvania history, something comes to mind unrelated to witchcraft, of course, is the modern political climate in this country, where it doesn't matter what side you're on. So I'm not even going to get too much in the weeds with that, to where you can have a person run for office or anything, and suddenly out of nowhere, a lot of accusations, which most likely aren't even true, get slapped on somebody, while they may not be found guilty in a court of these things, maybe not even a fine, but their reputation is pretty much destroyed from that point onward. Now, I mean, in a way, they do kill your character, unlike in the past where they were actually killing people for these type of things.
Yeah.
When they were being labeled as witches or what have you, it kind of seems like it's like kind of like a political move, or you can accuse somebody of a certain amount of things, maybe because you're jealous of the way they live their life, if they're doing better than you, or you may not even, let's say, agree with the way they practice their religion. So it just kind of seems like it was kind of easy back then to do that without even any kind of proof.
Yeah, and you could basically come up with whatever story you could think of, and if you could get enough people to go along with it or believe your story or just believe that you experienced it, like the appearing in spectral form, it's basically a form of sleep paralysis where people would wake up at night and your brain goes through different changes. Some people would see monsters or phantoms. Sometimes they would see their neighbor. So if you see your neighbor when you have one of these experiences, you can accuse them of witchcraft. And there were a lot of cases where people used that to actually, there was a case in Pennsylvania 12 years after that first case that I talked about in Pennsylvania. 2 years after the Salem trials, there were a couple of brothers in southeastern Pennsylvania who were tried, not in court, but like you say, in the court of public opinion. They were friends with William Penn, so they were also Quakers, but they had books on the paranormal, books on magic and necromancy and things like that. They were using it to help their neighbors. And that's something else that's common, where people use these practices or these different spiritual faiths to help their neighbors, but they're accused of things. And like you say, in this case, what actually happened, it might be different than what they were accused of. And if you look into the case, it was probably due to jealousy over one of the brothers sort of making off with one of the man's wives. So he gets tried for witchcraft because he went off with the guy's wife. sure, he was also practicing astrology and things, but what was the real reason that they accused him, you know?
Yeah, you kind of read my mind on that one because I was gonna say, sometimes if you're messing around with somebody's wife or your husband, that's a perfect recipe for being accused of something there.
Yeah. And the guy that accused him, actually, several of the accusers in that case actually came to America on the same ships that brought people bound for Salem. So there's sort of a social dynamic at play, I think, that it's more than coincidence that these people came on the same ships bound for America, and they all ended up in these witch trials separated by decades and hundreds of miles. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah,
had to be something else going on there.
oh, absolutely. There's I mean, prior to them arriving here, there's always something going on in whatever land you land on, and I'm thinking back when we talking about the sleep paralysis because at least now in modern times, it sometimes that gets linked with perhaps having an experience with extraterrestrials or being abducted.
Yeah,
And I don't think at that time they would have been able to connect the dots and think it would be a UFO experience. Nobody really was talking about that at that time, I believe.
yeah, definitely not extraterrestrials. I think every generation or every society has their own view of what that kind of thing is. And I get into that in the books a bit. And then in the next volume, I'm going to get into a little bit deeper. But yeah, the things that you see at night, they're more than any one, what you'd call a category, or like you say, it sort of goes into the paranormal in the sense of uh, abductions, alien abductions, whereas historically they were seen as either elves or fairy type creatures. A lot of, like I said, the appearing in spectral form, quote unquote, was seen as witchcraft. And a lot of the historical figures that they say attack people at night were seen as witch type figures or creatures that were equated with witches. You have the shadow figures and the Hat Man and things like that, and those are, today we see that they're sort of linked with abduction type scenarios. I think that there's sort of somewhere in between. There might be something psychological. I think maybe when you get down to it, the nature of reality might be more consciousness based, and maybe you experiencing the thing or being in the mind state or the brainwave state where you can experience the thing might open you up to all kinds of different scenarios. And some of those might be what we would today call an extraterrestrial. Maybe they would have called witchcraft before. Um, yeah, I think that in a lot of these cases, a lot of different paranormal categories, they sort of overlap more than a lot of people are willing to say.
And I agree. I think a lot of these things, everything's connected.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is in my opinion, the way you identify these experiences or these events, maybe because you're influenced by maybe your own religious or non-religious influence of what I guess, you attribute this being or experience to be about.
Yeah. Whatever your cultural biases, whatever your mythological folklore background tells you that it might be, is how you're going to experience it.
And I definitely agree with you on that. Now, before you were writing books, we talked about I believe last episode we talked about some of the cases you've worked, some of the places you were during your paranormal investigations. But there are times that I think it doesn't matter what flavor you come from when you come one on one, or when you start hearing things or having these experiences happen to you. Sometimes you got to call, 2 + 2 = 4. It's definitely something. So what have you seen out there that you can tell us that it's, I will say this for lack of a better word, was it was definitely a spirit, or it was definitely UFO. It was definitely a Bigfoot. So, what can you tell us a story of something that you've seen during your investigations?
It's tough. I think as time goes on and the more I research into these kind of things, the more they are interconnected and the more it is all sort of the same kind of thing. I think that there are a lot of cases where when I was investigating them, I saw it as one thing, and maybe now looking back, I see it as something else. I think we talked a little bit about the case where we had the kids talking to a dead lady. I don't remember. I think we talked about that one. So in that case, it was definitely a spirit. It's not something that I would call an ET or extraterrestrial. But at the same time, the way that that case worked out, the things that we were hearing from the psychic, he was experiencing something different than the history of the case. So the haunting was following sort of a different trajectory or a different storyline from the actual history that we found about the case. So, like I say, the more I look back on things, the less it looks like a simple case of whatever it was. I would say, as far as my experience, you asked what I would say I've experienced that was definitely one thing or another. 2018, I was looking into extraterrestrial type things. I was looking into how people are making contact psychically. I was doing some unusual experiments, let's say. I don't want to get into it too much, but I was attempting to make contact. I did have an instance where I went outside of my house and I got the feeling that I was being watched. There was a thought that occurred in my head that if aliens wanted to have an experience with you, they don't necessarily need to come down and talk to you. You wouldn't even necessarily know that an experience would have happened. They would have the technology to just scan you and understand everything about you. They can do that with your brain. We know that they have what we'd consider psychic technology or technology based on psychic abilities. And as I'm thinking this, I'm thinking they can just scan you. You would never know. They could make a copy of you. You would never know. And as I'm thinking this, this feeling that I'm being watched gets stronger and stronger. And I look up over my shoulder, and there's a huge, I would say about 100-foot wide triangle floating above my house. It was nighttime. It was blacker than the black of the sky. At two of the corners was a white light, and then in the front, so it was sort of drifting very slowly east over my house. So the front corner of this triangle had a red light rather than the other two that had white lights. So that was just sort of drifting slowly over my house, very slowly, slower than walking speed. At first, my brain was sort of trying to understand what I was looking at. I was looking for the fuselage. I was like, this plane is really low. And then I'm thinking, no, this is a triangle. It's staying still. It's not slow. It's definitely not a human craft, you know. I considered running into the house and grabbing my camera to get a picture or something like that, or a flashlight to try to flash at it. And then I'm thinking, that's how a lot of these abduction cases start. So I don't want to get myself into something that I'm not ready for. But I basically just watched it for, I'd say, about 10 minutes or so. And it just sat there slowly drifting eastward. And I considered going after it, sort of running in my car and chasing it down. But like I say, I didn't feel like being abducted or something. If it was, I've heard of government cases where governments are possibly using the triangular craft, and I didn't want to talk to the government or something like that either. So I would say that's probably the closest to something that's definitive something that I definitely know is one thing rather than something else.
I mean, I agree with you. Nobody wants to talk to the government, so
Yeah.
they're not really there to help you at all. By the way, but now, well, you brought something up not about the government. We're talking about going somewhere looking for something, and then you kind of found it. It's not a very common thing that happens. It- Do you think that perhaps there's something about you that you have some sort of link or some sort of energy that attracts these things to you?
Well, I always say I'm weird. Uh, there's something weird about me. I don't think that there's anything in particular about me. I think that because, like you say, I'm open to it. Uh, I always say that when you look into the paranormal starts looking back into you, whether that's looking into ghosts and spirit type phenomena, hauntings. I think we talked last time about how when you go into a haunting case, things are going to follow you home, whether you like it or not. Um, that happens with UFO cases a lot. Dogman cases, people say that they follow them home. So I think it's sort of just having the mindset of being open to experiences and being interested in the paranormal. It takes an interest in you also. That's how I would say it.
Yes, because and when you mentioned earlier that you're weird, that's the word that we all use to describe each other. I'm super weird too, especially because what I'm doing these last few years, a lot of people find it weird up until they find out and they get you in private. Then they start doing a little word vomiting and they start telling you, hey, when I was this age, when I saw this, and that. So it doesn't become as weird. Now, for our, and lack of a better word, our community, we understand each other. And I think there's something about these experiences, my friend, where once you have it, it kind of just changes you. Your whole life changes. There's just no going back to, I'll use the word normal or the word being asleep. Everything's different now. I mean, I don't know about you, if you feel the same way, but I feel very different ever since I had my first experience onward.
Yeah, it's like an awakening. Like you say, your eyes are open to the things, and I guess when your third eye is open, the things that are looking with their third eye are looking at you, looking at them, and everybody's looking at each other, and yeah, things start to make more sense in certain ways. Things that make sense to normal people might not make sense to you anymore because you realize how silly a lot of the things that people do are. But then there's this whole other realm of reality that quote unquote normal people don't experience or uh, don't admit to themselves that they experience. Like you said, uh, once you get people behind closed doors, they start to open up about these kind of things. And I think a lot of the times people don't admit to themselves that they've experienced something. And if they don't open up to the fact that it happened, they're sort of protecting themselves. And a lot of times I think not admitting or opening up your mind to the possibility of that kind of thing does close you off from aspects of reality that you would otherwise experience if your eyes were opened.
True. And I think, I mean, as a self defense mode, I think that they're comfortable doing that because I don't think maybe they're not prepared to deal with the reality of what it is we're dealing with.
Oh yeah, and that's understandable. I mean, there's weird monsters and things that stare at you in your sleep and things that aren't very pleasant to deal with. So I would definitely understand. I'm somebody that I prefer the truth, even if it's uncomfortable or scary. I would prefer to know what's actually going on, you know?
Oh, me too, Manny. We're talking, because we were talking about like UFOs and paranormal, but let's talk about something a little more on the side of animals in a sense or cryptids. Yet something else that Pennsylvania and West Virginia have a lot in common because in our area, our side of the fence, we're known for, of course, Bigfoot, grafted monster, flatwoods monsters. We have this thing called a wampus cat. Now, reading part of the description of your book, there it talks about certain things, but we're talking also about, and this is the first time I'll be completely honest, I've heard this term is called hex cats.
Yep.
Now, with hex cats, are we talking something like a shapeshifter? Or are we talking about an actual, let's say, like a mountain lion or a panther or a puma or something that may not be more common to Pennsylvania?
It gets back into the stuff that we talked about last time with my first book. We do have large black cats that are seen in Pennsylvania. They're actually seen everywhere. Let's be honest. There is all across the United States. People see these big black panther type animals. I call it a wampus cat also in the first book, just out of need for a name, something to call it, but yeah, the hex cats sort of go along with the wampus cat phenomena. There are cases where people accused of witchcraft or magic use have what are called familiars. So in witchcraft in history, witches supposedly had familiar spirits. They were animals or creatures that were given to them by the devil, supposedly. And this is using the historical Christian, Judeo-Christian sort of idea of how witchcraft worked in the Middle Ages. They believed that the devil gave witches these spirits or these demons in the form of animals to do their bidding. In actual Pennsylvania folklore, the way that actually tends to work out is people have experiences with these wampus cats and they attribute it to witchcraft. So one of the major cases here, probably about 10 miles from where I live, is the witchcraft of Tumbling Run. So there was a family that lived in this valley. They were told that there was going to be, or they were told that they were cursed by a local witch and that they would know the curse by the appearance of a black cat on their property. Soon after they were told that, a black cat appeared on their property. They tried to shoot at it. When they shot at it, not only did it not fall down dead, it grew to the size of something like a mountain lion. They said it was about 4 feet long. So this gets back to the whole idea of something the size of a mountain lion that's black, that slinks around in the night, like we talked about in the first book, where you have these things that are just out there. And for some reason, wherever they appear, bad things tend to happen. In the first book, I talked about one of the ladies that witnessed it, the bad things that happened to her afterwards. So that was called the Hex Cat case because they believed that it was sent by a witch. They tried to hunt it down. It would disappear from time to time. There was supposedly a local man had caught it, and he worked at a furniture store, so he took it to the furniture store where he worked, and they built a makeshift cage for it. They invited a local newspaper man to come and write a story about it and come and see the hex cat that they had caught. So the newspaper man came. He looked in the box. The box was empty. They looked around the furniture store. They finally found the cat. He said it was a large black cat. He described it as really weird. He said that it had big paws. He said it had a big flat face, which is, again, something that people talk about with the wampus cats, and having a very long tail. So these guys are getting scratched up, wrestling this cat back into the cage. And he said that he saw the thing wrap its tail around the bars and pull itself up like a monkey and then squeeze its head. He said that its head actually squeezed to several feet long So this thing's sort of like fluid and sort of flowing out of the cage in an unusual, unnatural way. He said that it stretched and started to sort of squeeze itself out of this. And we're talking about, I think it was an inch and a half wide space between the bars. So this fairly large cat is now squeezing itself out of something that's just impossible. So yeah, they supposedly can change shape, they change size. I talked about how when they shot at it, it grew to immense size and jumped away. In Washington D.C., there's a similar case of it's called the Washington D.C. Devil Cat, or Washington D.C. for Devil Cat, and that is sort of a spiritual ghost thing that's supposedly seen prior to either presidential assassinations or national tragedies. So they say that they see this in the basement level of the Capitol building in DC. It's a black cat, and when a security guard would come and try to capture it or something, it would grow to immense size and run away. There was a famous case where one of the security guards, I think, fired at it, and it grew to the size of a tiger and jumped over him and vanished. So there's sort of this common theme of folklore of semi-natural, semi-supernatural black feline that changes shape, changes size, can't be put down by bullets. The one that happened here in Tumbling Run, they were told by a witch doctor that to kill it, they would have to shoot it with a golden bullet. So the furniture store had a golden bullet made and offered a reward for somebody that was willing to come in and shoot it, because they thought that if they shot it, they would be cursed also. So what eventually happened, nobody knows. It sort of disappeared from the window of the furniture store. Nobody knows what happened to it. Horrible outcomes for everybody involved. Basically, the family ended up, some of them died, some of them went to insane asylum. One of them ended up being incarcerated for fraud, for trying to burn down his own house. So, like in folklore, they're linked to bad outcomes. Like people talk about a black cat crossing your path. These are a bit unusual black cats, but if they cross your path, bad things are going to happen. There's another major case in the book where a local young man, he was in his 20s, shot one of his neighbors to death. And when they investigated and found out why he did that, he said that it was because she was a witch and she had sent a black cat after him. And I talked about witches appearing in spectral form. He said that for the past, I think it was about 10 years since he believed that he had been cursed, he said that almost every night this black cat would appear. He would be walking up his steps and it would sort of unfold itself out of the corner of the room or out of the corner of the steps. If he looked at a sharp object, it would sort of appear out of the sharp object. When he was in bed asleep at night, it would appear and climb over him, crushing him, preventing him from breathing. And when he looked at it, he said that this black cat had the face or the eyes of the woman who he accused of witchcraft. So again, it gets back to the appearing in spectral form, the sleep deprivation or sleep paralysis type phenomena. The case, it's such a weird case. I talk about in this book something that this is a fairly famous case as far as American witchcraft. I get into some things that I discovered that a lot of people haven't talked about with it. And when you get down to it, several of the people involved reported seeing this black spectral cat. And there was a story that the woman who was accused of witchcraft prior to all of this happening, when she was younger, she herself had seen a black cat following her. She was in a horse and buggy with her husband. She looked out of the horse and buggy and saw a giant black cat following her. And she said that she thought that it was the devil. She thought that the devil was following them. She thought that this black cat was the devil incarnate, that it was following her. And sure enough, years later, she would be killed because of this imagery of a black cat, completely separate from her seeing this, what ostensibly would be an actual, possibly a black mountain lion just following her by the side of the road. And yet the black cat would become a symbol of her death and her being accused of witchcraft. So sort of that's sort of how the hex cat phenomena is sort of entangled with the wampus cat and black cat cryptids. It's all, like we talked about, it's all connected. It's all one phenomena, just sort of different aspects of it that we're seeing depending on the phenomena or how we see things.
No, and this is the beauty of these types of conversations, my friend, and shows like mine. Because when you're growing up, when you're younger, you hear these things about black cats or bad luck or the cross, this and that. This is, I think, the first time where somebody's presented a story about why the belief of a black cat is considered to be bad luck because of the experiences these people have with the spectral, these hex cats, that it's almost like, I want to say, let me see how I say this very carefully. It's like almost when you get to somebody with the flu and they contaminate you with the flu and you're sick for days. This kind of thing contaminates you with some sort of energy of bad luck, where once you had that experience with that cat, it's like your whole life just kind of goes downhill from there, or sideways of sorts.
Yeah, it's so weird. And like I say, like we talked about the Native Americans, they had this story of a black cat that they called the Great Lynx. And a lynx is a large cat species. It has a short tail, but this species this phenomena, this creature, this cryptid, spirit, manitou, whatever you want to call it, has a very long tail. It has a black fur. All other Native American cultures called it the underwater panther or the water panther. And you see that a lot of the witness sightings take place near water. So having the book series be about a river sort of made it easy to track those down, because they were seen all up and down the river. The Schuylkill River seems to be particularly a case where people see them there. But yeah, there's definitely something more to it. Sometimes it seems like a cryptid. Sometimes it seems like it might be a spirit. Sometimes it seems like it might be a witchcraft type phenomena. Sometimes it might seem like something other extra dimensional. They appear and disappear. They appear and disappear into water, which is something that's common with spirit phenomena, extraterrestrial phenomena. Everything's connected, man.
No, 100%, because it's all in how we describe that experience. That's the only way we can explain it. And I don't want to get too much away from your second book. And I know you talked about a third one coming out. What can we expect on the third one? What are you going to add in there?
So the third one is going to be about hauntings and ghost phenomena. I tried with the series to go from the more mundane to the more strange things. So I start with animals, go to witchcraft, and then to paranormal as far as hauntings and things like that. So the third volume is going to be about more spirit phenomena. And I'm going to get more, I'm getting back into the sleep paralysis type things because everything plays together. And it's also a way for me to get into the brain structure type things and how our brains allow us to perceive these things or make us perceive these things. And with the spirit phenomena, I also get into some of the weird things like people in this area sometimes when they're out looking for weird things, they'll get lost. There was a case very early in the history of this area of a man traveling in the Tumbling Run Valley where that hex cat happened, and he was lost for 3 days unnaturally. And that region of the county became known as the Devil's Hole. And that's something that you see a lot in the naming of places, that you'll see places named something unusual because of something unusual that happened there. And I had friends in college that were investigating paranormal stuff in a region called Hawk Mountain. Hawk Mountain is another famous area around here for hauntings. There was the Schambach Tavern, the possibly America's first serial killer. He had a mountain inn, and he would kill people that stayed at the inn. And he said later on that he did that because of the voices that he heard coming from the trees and this Native American spirit that supposedly wanted him to kill people. So, like getting back to what I was saying, some friends of mine were going there on a sort of legend trip and ended up in a totally different part of the county. They don't know how they got there. And Hawk Mountain is a fairly famous, it's somewhere locals know very well. People go there for day trips. People have been there several times. If you go to school anywhere around here, you've been there several times on day trips for school. It's not a place that you get lost going to, but they ended up in a totally different area that there's no way they could have accidentally ended up there, but they were just found themselves in a totally different area than they originally set out to be in.
Man, I'm telling you what, I'm already prepared for that third book because there's so much in there. You know, it's just one of those. I'm very happy with this interview. I'm not gonna lie to you, man, because I've learned so much from you. So much, so many exciting things. Now, I mean, as you were talking, and the listeners can't see this, but I have a notebook next to me, taking notes as you're going down. I gotta look into a lot of these things, but if you don't mind, and I know you might say yes, once you come close to releasing that book, please come back on the show. There's so much to talk about, and I really
Yeah,
want to catch up with you at the time, and then we'll definitely talk about it.
absolutely. It's something that when you're writing a book on the paranormal, it's hard. I kind of ended up writing 3 books because I set out to write one, and everything is so interconnected that you just have to keep making these connections and spelling them out. Otherwise, people don't realize this is something that's connected to this. This is connected to that. This is something connected to that. And you might have one experience, but somebody else might have had a different experience that they consider totally different, and everything's connected. Yeah.
Absolutely, man, and it's a beautiful journey we're on, and I know that it's never ending, but you know, it's fruitful to say the least, my friend. And for the listeners that would like to get a hands on a copy of either of your books, where can they go find out? Where can they find out where to purchase it? How can they get a hold of you?
They can go to my website, richardbigg.com. That's RICHARD, Richard Bigg, BIGG.com, richardbigg.com. The book links for the books are there. Contact info is there. I offer paranormal services, support, If somebody wants to just talk about their experience and sort of try to figure out what it is that they saw or experienced. I talk to people all the time about weird things that they had happen to them, and try to figure out how it connects to other things and make it make sense for them. So that's something that I'm always happy to do for anybody. It always helps me too.
Awesome. It's thank you for what it is that you do, because there are those out there, nothing bad, but they write books, they do the things, but that's usually where it ends. And there's a few of those that were willing to not only take other people's stories, but offer the help they need, just to help them gain the understanding of what it is they have experienced. So definitely thank you for that, and I look forward to having you back on the show very soon, my friend.
I look forward to coming back. I always appreciate you and love your work. Keep it up.
Thank you, my friend. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Please check us out on all our social media pages, as well as on YouTube and Rumble. Like, share, and subscribe. Also, Let's Find Out is on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Catch the show on Saturdays at 2 a.m. For more information, please visit KGRADB.com. That's KGRADB.com. Together, we will get one step closer to finding out. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
Let's find out with Diego! The power of Diego madness! Ooh, yeah! All content for Let's Find Out is property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.